Hello, my name is Michael Price. I'm here to talk to you about resigning, which is a subject very close to my heart because it's something I did 7 days ago from a job I've been in for 17 years. So I've been a sales recruiter for 24 years. I would think in that time I've had more than 1,000 placements. I've worked that out on basically three placements a month for 24 years. I think it's probably higher than that. And as I said, I've just resigned from a job that was in for 17 years. So I'm going to talk to you about my personal journey in doing that as well. But also some things that I've seen candidates do well and indeed badly, and some of the things that they have encountered whilst they have resigned. I think this is the last part of the process. So in my personal opinion, I think a candidate should be verbally offered a job that they agree with or disagree. Assuming that they agree with the verbal offer, then get the contract again, assuming they accept and are happy with the contract, sign the contract, and then resign. I also would like to point out that I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to give you my advice from the experience that I've seen, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm a recruiter. And also, this is something I personally struggled with because if you sort of got to know me, like I would like to think that I've got good morals, and I felt for a while that like I was doing a bad thing. And actually I wasn't, I was just doing something to take me on to the next stage in my career. And I think most of the candidates that I deal with tend to, broadly speaking, be nice people. They're people that I would associate with, and I think they're nice people. And I think nice people will tend to feel some remorse about resigning and then internalise it as being a bad thing, whereas it isn't. It's just part of the process. So first things first, should you do it? Should you resign? I think you've got to look at two key questions, really. One, does the job that you have been offered, does that solve the problems that you are trying to get away from? And there might not be problems per se. So in my previous job, it wasn't a bad job. I did it for 17 years, but there were just certain bits about it that I didn't want to do. It sounds strange, really, but I'm perfectly happy working on my own and not part of a team. So I didn't like relying on or being part of a team. So now, I don't have that. And you'll all have your own things that you're trying to solve. It might be product, it might be manager, it might be location. That's part one. Does the new job solve the problems that you have? And secondary, does it give you growth? So I think growth takes different forms. It's not always money. Growth might be to join a company where the company's growing, and you might be able to realise that and move up the sort of organisational chart. It might be that you might be stepping into a more complex sales environment. You might be moving into a newer product set. But does it give you growth from where you are currently at? If it meets those two criteria, and they are the criteria for me, I think then you absolutely should do it. And what's difficult about resigning? Number one, and this is the most obvious one, and it certainly struck a chord with me, is that our working relationship often blurs into a personal relationship. So I've got a 15-year-old daughter, an 11-year-old daughter. I worked through the financial crisis. I worked through the Brexit crisis. I worked through the pandemic. And all of those things that you go through that are difficult or life-changing, you will share that experience quite often with the people that you work with. And actually, whilst it's dead easy to say, let's be really insular and let's look at the fact that I go to work to have a job and I've got a personal life to have a personal life, there's a blurring there. And I think that is something that is quite difficult. I think the other thing, and I've put this in because it was very personal for me, is I just don't want to let other people down. If I say to my mate that I'm going to meet them in the pub at 9 o'clock on Friday, and when we arranged it, there was 10 of us, and then by the time Friday comes, I'm the only one left, I'll still turn up. I'm just that kind of person. And I felt that I was letting somebody down when I resigned. And I found that personally very difficult. But then actually, from a more personal perspective, I've got my own career, I've got a family, I've got my own aspirations. And at some point, you've got to look after yourself first. Commission, quite often with a lot of the resignations, you will be walking away from commission. I certainly did. I walked away. I was actually a founding business of the other business for 17 years. So I walked away from half a company, plus the commission, plus the money, and I literally walked away from it all. I hope, and time will tell, that it's been the right decision, but there is that short-term loss, and it's just awkward. Like, it's just a really awkward thing to do. In your mind, you think you're turning around somebody and saying, I don't like you anymore. No, you're not. You think about it logically, that's not what's happening, but that does create an awkwardness. So there's a few things I think you should do before you hand your notice in. One is very practical. There's stuff you might want, like I'm part of different WhatsApp groups that I go cycling with and training and go to the pub. I needed those numbers. The other one is, particularly with iPhones and other phones, I'm sure there are other types, but I take a lot of pictures with my phone, and I didn't want to lose my photos. And also I wanted to keep, and I suspect a lot of salespeople will want to keep the stats, because at some point down the line, you might need the stats of how much you've sold or those kind of things. Now, there may well be other things that you want to keep, but I think that information, think about, is important. Then the second thing is a handover. The reality is that the minute you hand your notice in, that other person has got to pick up with what you've left. Now, my colleague, I would say, luckily for him, I'd had a really, really good month. There was lots of detail, and I did a very detailed handover. Now, it wasn't so that he didn't have to call me, but actually he hasn't had to call me. But it was so that I felt, before I resigned, that I'd done the right and the professional thing, and there was a detailed handover document. The other thing that I did actually was I talked to people that I trusted. I spoke to my wife, spoke to my kids, I spoke to a couple of my friends, and I did that, A, because I think there's a degree to which we're all nervous. Certainly my friends thought I was mad, actually. And then also, it's a little bit like saying it out loud. And actually, I personally think the first time that you say it out loud shouldn't be the first time you're doing it, because that makes it harder. But I found that when I was talking to other people about it, and I was just talking about it in the open, that made a big difference on the day that I resigned. I did not talk to my colleagues, because I didn't think that was fair, but I did talk to my friends and my family. And also, I'm paranoid at the best of times, so I did log some events, like I'm going to talk about how to resign. I logged the emails that I sent to resign, and those kind of things. So, how to do it? I'd write a letter. I'm going to talk to you about the letter in a bit. I'll come on to that. I'd send the letter to the manager. I'd send it to HR. I'd send it to MD. I'd put all three on the same email. I would attach it. I would send it. I would send the letter with the handover document, all in one email, and then I would call a minute later. What I personally did was I hit send and I called. Now, actually, he didn't pick up the phone. He didn't pick up the phone for another 20, 25 minutes. But nonetheless, it was concrete. It was done. Then after that, I told colleagues, and they have many colleagues actually, because it's quite a small business. But actually, for me, I posted it on LinkedIn. I made it public. I had no reason at all to suspect that the narrative would be controlled in a negative manner toward me, but I didn't want that to be the case. I wanted to tell my version of events. When I wasn't detailed, I said I'd left, but I wanted the narrative to be controlled by me. And also, I was very clinical. I had a handover document. I had a letter. I had everything switched off. I was signed out of everything. When I resigned, it was a fait accompli. It was done. Now, actually, the build up to that and writing the letter and doing the handover, that's quite, it really cemented it in my mind. It made me feel more at ease with it. And it made it easier for the other director that I resigned to. It was done. All the information was there. Over the years, I've seen people, and I would say 90% of people, take a really half-assed approach. And whilst I think they take a half-assed approach because it feels like they're not being as cruel, or they are nervous about doing it, or whatever it might be, in the long run, that is more painful for you. There is absolutely no doubt about it. If you're clinical, straight, and do it right, it's more difficult to do it then, but it saves you time, it saves you pain, it saves you emotion. It's just a damn sight easier if you're as clinical as you can be. What's going to happen when you've done it? For me, I think you do it. My resignation conversation took less than a minute because I'd done the handover and I'd done the letter and all those various bits. I then really needed to take a massive deep breath and stepped away from my desk. I actually took the dog for a walk. I did it, took the dog for a walk, didn't take my phone. Just created a clearing between the two parts. I think what then you have to understand is that your relationship is changed. Whatever happens, your relationship with that person is changed. I think realistically, you have told them that, you've been doing other stuff, you want to do other stuff, you've been preparing in their time, you've been having interviews in their time. Your relationship with them is fundamentally changed. And actually, once you resign, you don't work for them anymore. So, if you resign from a company that you've been with for 17 years, what are they going to do? Fire you? They can't fire you. You've resigned. Can they make you attend a call at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning? No. Working hours are 9 to 5. Can they make you drive to London for 10 o'clock the next morning if you live in Leeds? No. You don't work for them. And I think that's really important. Also, from their perspective, then they've been rejected. None of us like being rejected. Anybody that says they're absolutely fine with rejection is 100% lying to themselves. Being rejected is a very difficult thing to happen. So you've got to be cognizant of that and put yourself into their shoes. Also, they have lost control. And you are now in control, and nobody likes losing control. And often when people lose control, they then maybe do or say things that perhaps they necessarily wouldn't. And often you'll see the inner truth in somebody. I think there's a lot of the time with all of us where we maybe don't say exactly what we think. I think when somebody loses control and it's like a massive punch in the face, they react. But remember, you're in control. They were in control. They were your boss. They're not anymore. And actually, I'll come on to a little bit more about what happens when people resign. But most people will try and protect themselves. If you get punched in the face, 9 times out of 10, you're going to try and protect yourself. If somebody tries to grab your car keys out of your hand when you're walking down the street, you'll try and protect yourself. It's a natural human instinct. It's what keeps us alive. There's a brilliant book on it about chimp paradox, which is amazing. It says the chimp brain can react so much more quickly than the human brain. It says the chimp brain is irrational, the human brain is rational. It's the irrational part that will reply. What happens? Number one, there's denial in them. I've seen it a lot of times where people just don't get any response at all. And actually, maybe that's somebody playing games, but actually a lot of the time it's just straight denial. They want to deny that is actually happening. There's anger. Clearly, if you resign and you're a person that wasn't going to be fired, people are going to be angry about that. And I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail as to why people are. Then there's despair. People accept it, and then and then there's acceptance. These are actually the 4 stages of grief. Expect that to happen, because it will. It did for me. It does for most. In terms of the letter, my letter will be very simple. Dear X, this is my formal resignation from X. I've enjoyed my time here, but I found another role which I've now accepted. There's also a detailed handover which I'll happily help you with. It's on the screen. What I think people do badly with resignation letters is just get vitriolic and put too much sort of description or emotion or whatever it might be. It's a letter. You're resigning. That's it. Leave. Full stop. That is all it needs to be. And I go back to that word clinical. Anything else, and the more information you give, the more you are opening yourself up for some form of reprisal or attack. In terms of other bits, so counter-offers, that's a very obvious one. To be clear, 1 in 5 of the jobs that I get are backfill whilst the incumbent is still there. If a client briefs me, my first question is this a refilling the role? And if the client says yes, I say, is the person still in situ? And 1 in 5 times they say yes. So to be clear, clients will make a counter-offer. They'll keep that person in place because they care about their pipeline. This is about control. That's what a counter-offer is. They're bothered about their pipeline and protecting themselves. They're embarrassed. They've got to tell their boss. They're losing control. So they will try and keep people in place. So at least they can turn around and go, listen, boss, yeah, such and such has resigned, but they are in place and I'm going to fill it so nobody ever knows. The other part, and it's a very obvious thing this, and almost a bit cliched, but I do agree with it, is, did you need to resign for recognition, for more money? To be clear, what happens a lot of the time is I see people who could be paid more, their employer know they could be paid more, and why don't they pay them more? It's so that if they resign, they've got wiggle room to pay them more. 100%, that happens all the time. We've spoke about control, so I'm going to move on from that. Fix this, Sam. So that's what happens, right? You resign to your boss. Your boss then has to tell their boss. That looks badly on your boss. 100% it reflects badly because you're a good person. The company likes employing you. Your boss is going to get a hard time over this. So in their element of controlling it, counteroffer is something else. Their boss will say to them, what do we need to do to get X stay? One of your boss's answers may well be, how about we offer them X amount of money? That's control, and that's your boss then has to sell that to you. And it might not be money, it might be position, but that's your boss has to sell that to you. But you are in control. And actually it's cheaper. It's cheaper to offer you a counter offer than it is to hire. So if you leave, if somebody briefed me today, how long would it take to fill a role from brief to person starting? 3 months. How much are you going to charge them? Yeah, I'm going to charge them, I don't know, depends on the fee, but maybe 12 to 30k in terms of a fee. They've got to pay that to me. They've got to pay it up front. And even if they offer you 30k and it takes them 3 months to fill the role, they take them 30 divided by 12 times 3. Damn sight cheaper. Non-competes. See non-competes quite a lot. Literally, as I said, I'm not a lawyer, but I've literally never, ever seen one upheld. And I mean ever. And I have seen some people move directly from one competitor to another. We had a guy work for us. He left us the next day, went into IT sales recruitment, and we could not make that. My former employer could not make that non-compete stick. Notice periods. I resigned. This today is Wednesday. I resigned last Monday. I resigned at 9. I started what I'm doing now at 9:10. I resigned from NEC. I had a 3-month notice period. I worked a day. Then in fairness, I was very clinical, very brutal. I said, I'm leaving today. Don't worry about paying me because I'm going to start somewhere else and somebody else is going to pay me straight away. So actually you could step away from your notice period if it's 3, 6, 9 months, whatever, and start with another company, but not get paid. Now, obviously, that is about the recruiter managing the start date with your employer. So you need to make sure the recruiter's on top of that, because if the new employer says, let's start in 3 months and you resign today and can start tomorrow, can your new employer do that? But notice periods, they're not as hard and fast as you think. And references, it's 2024. I wouldn't bother taking a reference. I say it to all my clients. What is the point in taking a reference? And do you know what? If you resign and your employer does not give you a reference, your current employer doesn't give you a reference, I think your next employer will pragmatically say, yeah, I expected that. That's not going to happen. So they're my points on resignation. Like I say, you've just got to take it easy and realise it's not a bad thing. You're just moving on in your career. And actually, if you're clinically, you do it right, 5 minutes after you've done it, trust me, I did it after 17 years working with somebody who I liked, and I still like, and quite whether he likes me, we'll see. But 5 minutes after you've done it, you feel great and it's the right thing to do. And whilst it might appear in your mind to be a tough thing, you've just got to do it for the sake of your career. My contact details are on the screen. You've probably got them anyway, but nonetheless, thanks for listening. Hope that helped.